So, 3 weeks ago, I got this invitation. It was fancy embossed letters on cream cardstock. My mom, Patricia Morrison, inviting me to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Riverside Garden Club. And right away, I'm thinking, why now? You know, but then my mom calls that same day saying, Michael, I'm having a party, June 15th. You should come. It wasn't really a question, more like a demand. But the way she said it, like it would mean something if I showed up. I'm 29, and for as long as I can remember, my mom's been, well, disappointed in me. Like, it started when I didn't go to Princeton and picked state school, when I didn't study law and ended up in math, and of course, when I moved into a tiny studio in Queens instead of sticking around in Greenwich like she wanted. I knew what she was really asking. I want to show my friends that I have a son, even if he's not the son I wanted. But I told her I'd be there anyway. Honestly, I had no idea what I was walking into. So, I finally showed up at the party, standing in the grand marble foyer of my parents' house along the Connecticut shoreline. I'm looking around, seeing this full-on old money type of thing going on, people in designer dresses, men in blazers and khakis, champagne flutes catching the afternoon sunlight. And me, I'm standing there in khakis and a button-down shirt, not exactly fitting the picture. Honestly, I wasn't even sure I belonged there. You know when you're the odd one out in a room full of people who all seem to have their lives together? Yeah, that was me. I was 29 and my mom had been, well, let's just say she'd been disappointed in me for most of my life. It started when I chose state school over Princeton, then when I majored in math instead of law, and the big one when I decided to live in a small studio apartment in Queens instead of staying in a fancy house in Greenwich with them. And now, here I was, walking into yet another one of her social events, just feeling like I'm always the one who doesn't measure up. The tension between my mom and me was thick, like a cloud hanging over everything. I could feel it in the way she spoke to me. Everyone, this is my son, Michael, she said, her smile bright but somehow not reaching her eyes. She introduced me, but the words felt off, like she was saying it more out of obligation than anything else. Michael works in the city, she continued, her voice carefully neutral. He has a very unique schedule. And that was it. That was the introduction. Just a quick brush off. No mention of what I actually did. Not that I expected her to. She had this way of downplaying anything I'd accomplished, especially when it didn't fit into her world of high society and proper careers. Then this guy named Robert Ashworth, a distinguished-looking man with a handshake that could break your bones, reached out to me. He was curious about what I did, like he really wanted to know. So I told him, I manage investments. The guy looked intrigued. Investments. He leaned in a little closer. Which firm? But before I could even get a word out, my mom jumped in. Oh, Michael's being modest, she said, laughing nervously. He works in facilities management, office buildings mostly. Facilities management. The words felt like a slap in the face, and I could see the confusion in Robert's eyes. I could see it in the eyes of everyone around me. Facilities management, I repeated, trying to keep my composure. Yes, I manage office buildings. It was all I could do to keep my cool. My mom wasn't ashamed of the work, but she was definitely embarrassed that it didn't sound good enough for her friends. She wanted to make it sound more acceptable, more respectable, and it wasn't, not in her world. So, there I was, standing there, looking like a fool. I wasn't just the son she was trying to show off to her friends. I was the son she was trying to explain away. And then my sister Amanda stepped in, her voice dripping with disdain. She handed a champagne flute to my mom, making sure to make eye contact with me. Is that what you're wearing? She asked, a little too loudly. I glanced down at my khakis and button-down shirt, feeling that familiar weight of judgment. "What's wrong with it?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Nothing if you're going to a job interview at H&R Block," Amanda replied, smirking. "These are Mom's closest friends. Michael, the Vanderbilts are here, the Ashworths. Catherine Rothschild flew in from London." I tried to brush it off, but it was hard when your own sister is treating you like you don't belong. Her words stung, but they weren't new. I was used to them by now. Amanda had always been the perfect one, the one who never disappointed anyone. Graduating from Yale, going straight to Goldman Sachs, making a fortune. She had it all. And I had a job that she could barely tolerate. The words she spoke were a reminder of everything I hadn't done, everything I hadn't become in her eyes. I mean, she worked in investment banking. I worked nights cleaning offices. But the thing was, I wasn't just cleaning offices. I owned them, and nobody knew that. Not even my mom, not even Amanda. The afternoon stretched on, the party growing louder, more crowded, and the more people I met, the more I realized just how out of place I felt. My mom introduced me to her friends, one by one, each of them pretending to be interested in my life. They all turned toward me with that polite, almost bored curiosity. It wasn't real interest. It never was. And every time someone asked what I did, I felt that familiar knot in my stomach. "He has a unique schedule," my mom would say. Like that explained everything. The truth, I managed a $12 billion hedge fund, but I didn't need to tell them that. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I excused myself and walked toward the pool house, hoping for a moment of peace. I pulled out my phone and saw 47 new emails, 3 from my chief investment officer, 2 from my legal team, 1 from my accountant. I was responding to the most urgent messages when my mom found me 20 minutes later. "There you are," she said, breathless. "Michael, you can't just disappear. People will think you're rude." I couldn't even respond to that. "People think I'm a janitor," I muttered. "I doubt they'll notice if I'm here or not." She wasn't having it. Her face tightened and she snapped back, "Don't be dramatic. There's nothing wrong with honest work." I looked at her, knowing this was a battle I wasn't going to win. I'd fought it for years, tried to show her that I was doing something important, something meaningful, but it never mattered. She didn't get it. She didn't get that cleaning offices wasn't my whole life. She didn't understand that the money I made from my business had helped me build something far bigger. And that, no matter what, I wasn't going to change just to fit into her world. She wanted me to be like Amanda. She wanted me to follow the same track, to be successful in a way she understood. But that wasn't me. It was never going to be me. And when she brought up Amanda again, "Your sister graduated from Yale, and she went straight to Goldman Sachs. She makes $400,000 a year. She has a beautiful apartment in Tribeca. She dates a neurosurgeon." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that I had made $840 million last quarter. But I didn't. I stayed quiet. Amanda's life was perfect in her eyes. I wasn't allowed to exist on the same level. "You're 29, Michael," my mom said. "At your age, your father had already made partner at his firm." I couldn't even look at her. I was trying to keep it together. But the weight of all the years of disappointment, all the years of feeling like I wasn't enough, it was too much. I wanted to walk away, to leave the party, to never come back. But instead, I stayed. I kept my head down, tried to avoid the crowd, and answered the questions that no one really cared about. I was a disappointment to them. And at that moment, it didn't matter what I'd built, what I had accomplished. It didn't matter that I owned office buildings and managed billions. In their eyes, I was still the son who had failed to live up to their expectations. And that was the hardest part, because no matter what I did, No matter how successful I became, I was never going to be the son they wanted. Amanda, standing in her perfect dress, couldn't see that. She just saw me as the guy who worked nights cleaning toilets. And my mom, she would always see me as the guy who didn't make it, no matter how much money I made, no matter how big my fund grew. I was just never going to fit into their world. I wasn't perfect. I didn't belong. But I wasn't going to apologize for it anymore. I was done. So I'm standing there at the party, kind of hiding in plain sight, just trying to make myself as invisible as possible without actually leaving. I'm looking around, watching my mom and her friends laugh, nodding their heads, exchanging stories that I couldn't even begin to relate to. The women were all dripping in pearls and diamonds, the men in their blazers and khakis chatting about the latest stock market trends or which country they'd vacationed in last summer. And there I was, in my khakis and button down, feeling like I'd walked into the wrong scene. I wasn't even sure if I was supposed to be there. Everyone had their roles, right? The people who actually mattered, and then the ones who just didn't. And, well, I was in the latter category. I had come to the party because my mom asked me to, but the truth was, I didn't really know why I was there. Every time I tried to get close to my family, to fit into their world, I ended up feeling more and more like an outsider, like I didn't belong. And it wasn't just because of how they dressed, or the fancy cars parked outside, or the way they spoke to each other. It was the way they saw me. I wasn't a success story in their eyes, not like Amanda, not like their friends. I was just the guy who worked in facilities management, and that was the label my mom would always use. No matter how hard I tried to change it. I could see it in the way they looked at me. Robert Ashworth, the guy who had introduced himself earlier, asked what I did. I told him I managed investments, figured I could at least give them the truth in a way that sounded somewhat professional. But before I could say anything more, my mom jumped in. She laughed nervously, like she was trying to brush off the awkwardness of the situation. "Oh, Michael's being modest," she said, her voice faltering slightly. "He works in facilities management, office buildings mostly." Facilities management. The words hit me like a punch in the stomach. She'd said it so casually, like it wasn't a big deal. But to her, it was everything. It was how she saw me. It was what I was reduced to in her world. Not the guy who had started a hedge fund. Not the guy who had managed to grow that fund to over $12 billion. But the janitor, the cleaner of office buildings. And there, in that moment, I knew that none of them would ever see me for what I truly was. Not unless I told them. Not unless I stood up and said, "I'm not just some guy cleaning office floors. I'm managing billions in assets, running a successful fund, making decisions that impact the financial world." But I didn't. I didn't want to say that. I didn't need to prove anything to them. The truth was, I didn't care what they thought about me. And yet, the way they looked at me like I was a curiosity at best, a failure at worst, it hurt. But this wasn't just about my mom. It was about everyone else too. The women in pearls, the men in blazers. They all looked at me the same way, like I was invisible, or worse, like I was beneath them. At one point, I caught a glimpse of my mother's friends whispering behind their hands, glancing over at me with polite curiosity. But there was nothing real behind it. It was like they were trying to figure me out, trying to place me in the puzzle of their perfect ordered lives. And no matter how many times I told myself it didn't matter, it still stung. The worst part, my sister Amanda, she walked up to me with that perfect icy smile she always had when she was about to drop a truth bomb that only she thought was funny. She handed my mom a champagne flute, then looked me over, giving me this look like she couldn't even believe I was still here. "Is that what you're wearing?" she asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. And she wasn't joking. It was more of a dig, a judgment. I glanced down at my khakis and button-down shirt. What was wrong with it? I wasn't trying to dress like I belonged to the same crowd they did. I wasn't pretending, but I could feel the weight of her words pressing down on me. "What's wrong with it?" I asked, trying to brush it off, but my voice cracked a little, I guess, because she was already rolling her eyes. "Nothing, if you're going to a job interview at H&R Block," Amanda said. I couldn't help it. The words hit me, and I didn't know how to respond. She didn't even try to hide her contempt. The way she looked at me, like I wasn't even worth the time to pretend. She went on. "These are Mom's closest friends. Michael, the Vanderbilts are here, the Ashworths, Catherine Rothschild flew in from London." It was like a list of names she expected me to recognize, names that meant something in their world. In my world, I didn't care about them. They didn't matter. But to Amanda, they were the definition of success, of importance. And I was just the guy in the wrong clothes with the wrong job, trying to fit into a world that wasn't meant for me. I wanted to shout at her, to tell her that it wasn't about the clothes or the people or any of that stuff. I wanted to tell her that I'd worked harder than anyone could imagine, that I'd built something with my own two hands, with my own mind. I wanted to tell her I didn't need her approval, but I didn't. Instead, I said, "I'll try not to embarrass you." I didn't want to cause a scene, even though it felt like everything I did was already an embarrassment to her. Amanda's response, "Too late for that." She sighed dramatically and walked away, leaving me standing there, feeling small and out of place. I stood there for a long moment, just watching my mother surrounded by her friends on the terrace. She was laughing at something, probably something that wasn't even funny, and I felt this wave of frustration build up inside me. She didn't see me, not really, not for who I was. She just saw the son who hadn't lived up to the picture she had painted in her mind all those years ago. I walked outside into the garden. It was stunning Mom's pride and joy, kept up by a team of landscapers, white roses climbing trellises, hydrangeas blooming in massive clusters. A string quartet played softly near the pool house. And for a moment, I just stood there, taking it all in. I hated this place. Not because it was beautiful, it was, but because it represented everything that felt so fake to me. It was a world that didn't care about anything except appearances. And it was a world that would never understand me. And then I saw my mom. She spotted me immediately. Her smile was bright, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Everyone, this is my son, Michael." I wanted to cringe. I could feel the eyes of her friends on me, all of them turning to look, but none of them really seeing me. My mom continued, "Michael works in the city. He has a very unique schedule." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. She wasn't telling them I had a hedge fund, wasn't telling them I managed billions. She was telling them what I did, not who I was. And when Robert Ashworth asked me what firm I worked for, my mom quickly jumped in again. "Oh, Michael's being modest," she said. "He works in facilities management, office buildings mostly." And that was it. The conversation moved on so fast, it was like none of them cared. I could feel it, though everything about me was being reduced to that. Facilities management. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them everything, to say that I wasn't just some guy cleaning toilets, that I wasn't some failure they could all look down on. But I didn't. I just stood there, silent. And that, right there, was the hardest part. They didn't see me. They never would. By 4 p.m., the party had reached full swing. The garden was filled with more people now, guests who had arrived later, the younger crowd from finance and tech who'd come straight from their offices in Manhattan. I was trying to avoid most of them. My mother, of course, kept introducing me to everyone as her son, Michael. But each time, the awkwardness of her tone, the way she glossed over everything about me, made it harder to keep up the charade. I wasn't just the son she was ashamed of anymore. I was the son she didn't even understand. and I was starting to feel the weight of that more than I could handle. I was standing near the rose garden, lost in my own thoughts, when I felt a buzz in my pocket. My phone. I pulled it out and checked the screen. It was from my CFO. James Bloomberg wanted a statement on the quarterly performance, up 34%. It was the kind of news that normally would have me feeling on top of the world. But here at my mother's party, surrounded by a crowd that barely cared about me, much less the success I was quietly building, it didn't feel like much of a victory. I quickly typed out a reply. Thought send it through, but let's hold off on any press for now. Then I silenced the phone and stuffed it back into my pocket. I could feel the tension in the air as my mother hovered around, weaving in and out of conversations with her friends, making sure to keep me at a distance, and I hated it. She was acting like everything was fine, like she was proud of me, but I could see it in the way she introduced me to people. I could see it in the way she avoided talking about what I actually did. She was embarrassed, and nothing I did was ever going to change that. But that's when it happened. Out of nowhere, I felt my phone buzz again. This time, it was a text from Sarah, my executive assistant. The Wall Street Journal was running a profile on me tomorrow, a piece about my fund, about the success we'd achieved in the last quarter. I'd been expecting it, but the timing was off. I stared at the text for a second, then slid the phone into my pocket. I knew that this was about to get out of hand. My mother had no idea what was about to hit her. I could already imagine her reaction. That perfect smile slipping from her face when she realized that her son, the janitor, the failure, the disappointment wasn't who she thought he was at all. I didn't have time to think about it. The noise of the party, the chatter of her friends filled the air again, and I tried to focus. I couldn't. The moment I had been avoiding was coming, and I wasn't sure I was ready for it. Then, I heard the sound of the television in the living room. It was faint at first, barely audible over the hum of conversations, but then it grew louder, and I heard the words, "Breaking news, mystery hedge fund manager revealed." I froze. My stomach dropped, and I felt a sudden chill run through me. I couldn't move. I didn't know if anyone else had heard it. My heart started pounding, and I glanced over toward the living room. That's when I saw it. The screen was flashing my face. A photo of me from a conference I had spoken at last year. The anchor's voice carried through the house. Michael Morrison, the 29-year-old founder of Meridian Capital Management, has been revealed as the manager behind one of the most successful hedge funds in history. I felt like the floor had just dropped out from under me. My mother's face went pale, and I could see her eyes widen as the anchor continued. With $12.3 billion in assets under management and consistent triple-digit returns, Morrison has achieved what most managers spend lifetimes pursuing. And there it was, the truth. The whole world was about to know who I was. Not just some guy who worked in facilities management, not the janitor my mom liked to explain away, but a successful hedge fund manager, someone whose name was about to be everywhere. He lives modestly in Queens and commutes to his Manhattan office via subway, the anchor said, describing the way I kept my life private. It was like everything I had worked for, everything I had hidden for so long, was being laid bare in front of the people who'd never known me. I wasn't just the son my mother tried to hide. I was the one who had built something real, something people would pay attention to. And my mom, she had no idea. The camera cut to a financial analyst who said, "What Michael Morrison has accomplished is simply unprecedented. To build a fund of this size with these returns at his age, there's no comparable achievement in modern finance." I watched my mother's expression change. Like the ground beneath her feet was shifting. I could see her brain trying to catch up with what was happening. She couldn't process it. She couldn't understand how her son, the one she had always considered the failure, could have done something so extraordinary. Her champagne flute slipped from her hand, shattering on the terrace stone. I didn't know if she noticed, but everyone around her did. The guests who had been polite and distant just moments before, they were now staring at the screen in shock, then at my mom, then back at the screen again. The contrast was too much for them to handle. They'd spent the afternoon pretending that they knew who I was, laughing at my mom's awkward explanations, pretending they cared about what I did. And now they were looking at me like I was some kind of mystery. Catherine Rothschild, who had been standing next to my mom earlier, looked at her, then back at the screen. "Is that Patricia's son?" she asked, almost whispering. My mom didn't answer. She couldn't. Amanda, who had been walking in the other direction, heard the commotion and stopped. She turned toward the living room, her eyes wide. Her mouth dropped open as she saw my face on the screen, the name scrolling across the bottom. "Oh my God," she whispered. She looked at me, and for a moment, I saw something in her eyes that I had never seen before. Disbelief. But it wasn't just disbelief at the news, it was disbelief at herself, at how wrong she had been about me. Before she could speak, the anchor continued. "Morrison has been notoriously private, rarely giving interviews and maintaining almost no public profile. But sources close to the fund confirm that this young man has revolutionized modern quantitative trading strategies." I could hear the murmur of voices from across the room. It was like everything stopped for a second, then all at once, everyone started talking at once. Phones were pulled out, and people began whispering, trying to process the information they had just learned. And in that moment, I saw my mom's face crumble. She sat down heavily in one of the chairs on the terrace, surrounded by her friends, a mix of shock and fascination on their faces. She couldn't believe it. "Michael, that was you," she asked, her voice trembling. I nodded. There was nothing more to say. I wasn't the janitor. I wasn't the failure. And I wasn't going to hide anymore. But it was too much for her. It was too much for all of them. The camera cut to a B-roll of my office building in Manhattan. It was a sleek glass tower in the financial district, a symbol of everything I had worked for. The anchor finished. Morrison's fund operates from here, where a team of 53 analysts and traders manages one of the most sought-after investments in the world. The fund is currently closed to new investors, with a waiting list of over 200 institutions. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I didn't need to look at it. I could already hear the reactions. People were calling, texting. The news had spread like wildfire. My mother's friends surrounded her, some of them in shock, some of them fascinated. They had no idea who I was. And now they did. But what good was it? What did it change? Amanda walked into the living room, her voice cutting through the chatter. "Yes, that's our brother Michael, the one who cleans offices." The words hung in the air like a slap in the face, but she didn't care. She didn't know what else to say. The party had transformed. Where just an hour ago, people had avoided me, now they surrounded me, all wanting to talk, to apologize, to impress me. But I didn't want anything from them. All I wanted was to leave. And so, I did. After the chaos of the reveal, I needed to escape. The noise, the questions, the eyes on me, it was too much. I slipped away to the library, but Amanda found me again. This time, she didn't walk in with that air of superiority she always had. She looked different. "You didn't tell me," she said, almost in a whisper. Her voice cracked. "You didn't tell me you were this successful." She sounded like she was still trying to process everything, trying to piece together the truth she'd been so blind to for years. I didn't answer right away. I was too busy thinking about everything I had done to get here, everything I had hidden to keep the peace with them. My sister, the golden child, had never seen me as anything but the disappointment. But now she was finally seeing the truth that I didn't need her approval. I never had. "How long were you planning on keeping this from us?" she asked, sitting down beside me. I didn't have an answer for that. I wasn't trying to hide it. I just didn't care about their world. I never had. "Look, I didn't want this," I said finally. "I didn't need any of this recognition. What I do, it speaks for itself. I don't need to prove anything to you or Mom." Amanda was quiet for a long time, but then she spoke again, softly. "I'm sorry, Michael, for everything. I've treated you like crap." I just nodded. It wasn't enough, but it was a start, and maybe that was all I was going to get. In the end, I realized something. Success doesn't come from the approval of others, especially not from your family. It doesn't matter if they see you for what you truly are, or if they ever understand what you've done. What matters is staying true to yourself, to the work you believe in. For me, it was always about the process, the journey, not the applause or the recognition. It was about making something real, something that worked, and finding satisfaction in that. Family, they'll always have their own expectations of you, but you can't live your life according to their rules. I spent years trying to be what they wanted me to be, trying to earn their respect. But in the end, I found peace in knowing that my worth wasn't tied to their perceptions. Maybe they'll come around one day. Maybe they won't. But I don't need them to define who I am anymore. I know who I am. And that's enough. If you're feeling that same push and pull between what others expect and what you want for yourself, just remember you don't need anyone's permission to be who you are. You don't need to prove anything. Just keep doing the work that matters to you. And hey, if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. No pressure, of course. Just do what feels right for you.